Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 o'clock in London, it's 1 p.m. in New York. Finally, our time zones have realigned, thankfully, for the current, equinox towards the next solstice. It's 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO-VID Livestream Series 8, Episode 3, that amounts to 45 shows, starts here. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Ivana Gažić. I've just got back to Europe after an incredible stay in the Caribbean, where, as you know, we were having great conversations with Chris Giancarlo, with Peter Leonardos when I was in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And before that, we were in the Bahamas with the good folks of Arawak X. We're staying with a very interesting niche exchange theme today. We're inside the Zagreb Stock Exchange. Ivana Gažić is the president of the management board of the Zagreb Stock Exchange, which is the leading developer of the capital markets in the region. And what an exciting region Southeastern Europe is. Ivana started her career in 1998 at Pliva Plc, where she worked until 2003 as head of global capital market operations, going on to work for several local banks. Since May 2010, she's been running the Zagreb Stock Exchange. She's also president of the Supervisory Board of the SEE LINK Skopje, a legal entity founded in 2014 with the aim of establishing regional order routing services between a series of different markets, Bulgaria, Macedonia, and the Zagreb Stock Exchange. That was, of course, added to because just the next year, in fact, at the end of 2015, Ivana's Zagreb Stock Exchange acquired the Ljubljana Stock Exchange, where she's also president of the Supervisory Board, rather. Ivana is also a member of the Council of the Croatian Financial Supervisory Agency, and it's a pleasure to have her here today to talk inside the Zagreb Stock Exchange. Well, that may be a leading question to start, Ivana, but where in the world are you today?
Hello, Patrick. It's really nice to have this conversation with you, especially since we know each other for a very long time. And you have been following Zagreb Stock Exchange for a bit now. So you know that we have transformed from a purely local exchange to the somewhat of a regional player, especially after we have acquired Ljubljana Stock Exchange, as just mentioned. And recently, we managed to acquire 7% of Skopje Stock Exchange in North Macedonia. So what we are trying to do is somehow find the liquidity in the region and give opportunity to the investors of the region to get acquainted with the shares of the neighboring countries.
Absolutely fascinating, and you're absolutely right. I've been enjoying watching the journey that you've been on for the course of the last 10 years, Ivana, and a very exciting one it is too. Talk me through, just for a moment, what are all of the functions within your little department store, the Zagreb Stock Exchange itself?
So I would say we have four main areas of work. I will start with the communications department, who is taking care of, PR issues, articles, and so on. But also we have pretty developed academy where we have educated more than 15,000 people in these 10 years of its existence. We have a shorter seminars on finance, but we are also giving public general knowledge to the general public about the capital markets, what trading means, and so on. Then we have an IT department, which I would say it's the heart of our organization. I would say that exchanges are becoming more and more technical organizations, and we have changed quite a bit of software in these 12 years. We used to run on NASDAQ. Now we are using Xetra, like many other exchanges in the region. And we are just now developing our own surveillance system because due to unlucky path of our surveillance systems, we had 4, and now we are trying to replace it with our own solution, proprietary solution. Then we have a department in charge for the market operations and surveillance. and they are actually doing everything connected with listing, members, changes of the system, and so on when we have some new listing or some change in the trading pattern and so on. And finally, there is a legal department. Legal is another heart of the exchange because we are, heavily regulated, and almost any decision in the company requires the presence of lawyers. Besides other things, we are also listed on ourselves, so for 5 years already. And so we have a person in charge for investor relations. We have around 300 shareholders. And we have, of course, our daughter companies that we are managing ourselves on various ways. But domestic operations are handled from here. It's a tower in Zagreb, 22nd floor. And Ljubljana is only 1.5 hours away by car, although it's in another country. So we travel there for meetings, and for Macedonian trips, it's a 1-hour flight. So everything is, I would say, in the same region.
Very interesting, and quite a dynamic region, which we'll get onto in just a moment. So just so that everybody understands, you list stocks and bonds, including also your own shares. Do you own your own clearing settlement depository?
No, which is not good scenario for us. So unluckily, first to come what we are listing. So besides what you have mentioned, we also have recently listed 2 ETFs, and they are, I would say, a pretty big success in Croatia because it's very well designed for retail investors. And regarding the clearing and settlement, neither in Croatia or Slovenia, we don't own depository and clearing, which I think is very bad for the exchange because it is much easier to plan new products and development of the market if you have both sides of the cycle, how to say that, on your supervision. So in Croatia, it's state-owned. We were talking with our government for numerous times to privatize it. We are not really sure why they didn't move on that. And in Slovenia, it's owned privately, but not by the persons who are involved by the exchange or connected to the exchange.
Yes, it's an interesting scenario, and obviously you're in the same position as, for example, Warsaw, because they've got 2 completely different companies for the stock exchange and the depository as well. Okay, so you're listed. You say you've got your own stock listed. Talk us through that. Are there any particular shareholder limits in open to foreigners, or percentage limits that can be acquired? Anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the whole process of the self-listing, we didn't find a lot of descriptions of this process when we decided to do it. We did it because when we were acquiring Ljubljana, we needed capital increase, and we wanted to have institutional investors as part of our shareholding structure. And this is when actually EBRD became our shareholder. EBRD was a big advocate for the capital markets in all their countries of operations. They still are, and they were supporting us through many projects, and we really wanted to have them on board. We still have a board member. His name is Bernardo Mariano, and he is a stock exchange expert from Argentina. And he's actually traveling to all our board meetings, and we find that very useful because he's acting as our advisor when we don't know something, or we want to understand how other exchanges in the world are doing that, and so on. Obviously, being the only exchange in the country makes your job a bit difficult because you cannot ask your colleagues how to run the exchange. So just to come back to the protection rules, I would say it's very standard in Europe for each threshold of the ownership, and the first one being 10%, you need to have a special approval from the regulator in order to acquire. There is no limitation on anybody, but obviously they wouldn't give approval to somebody who is for some particular interest trying to get a stake in the exchange.
Understood. I mean, it's a reasonable fit and proper process, as opposed to there being an actual lack of permission. So as long as you are essentially upstanding, fine and reasonable, you can buy a stake in the exchange. That's very interesting. And so roughly, what's your sort of market capitalization today in euros or dollars?
It's around 10 million euro.
Okay, and that's a number. That's good to know.
For 2 exchanges. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it seems to me to be quite remarkably cheap, actually, given the fact that it combines both Zagreb and Ljubljana together. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, the development of the Zagreb exchange. As I remember, there used to be a couple or even possibly 3 exchanges in Croatia. Is my memory serving me correctly?
Yes, it actually does. There were 2. The other one was in Varaždin, which is one city like 100 kilometers from here. And basically it was created as a competition to Zagreb Stock Exchange. And they started to compete each other on the prices. And shareholders were practically the same. And then they sat down and decided to merge the 2 exchanges. It happened in 2007, and until we still have some people from the old exchange working with our exchange.
Very good, very interesting altogether. So as things stand at the moment, how has your experience been with, first of all, developing Zagreb over the course of the last 10 years?
When I joined the exchange, of course, it was in 2010, right after the big crisis of the markets, and everybody had still fresh memory of the 2 large privatizations that happened in 2007, and people were thinking that the state might continue to privatize, which over the course of 2 or 3 years, the first 2 or 3 years when I joined, showed to be wrong, because the state decided not to privatize anymore. And then we were just, we were sitting and thinking what we can do to somehow bring the liquidity to the market, because obviously there was enough investors, but there were not enough investment cases. And we decided first to go international to try to acquire some other exchange. And then after that, we also decided to build up the whole path of financing for the companies in all stages of development. So for the smallest ones, like startups and very small SMEs, we entered into partnership with Funderbeam from Estonia, which is at that time it was a platform built on blockchain. Now they changed technology, but they are still running this market. And we started organizing financing for these very small companies. It was considered very revolutionary from the other exchanges, if I can say so. Many of them were thinking about it, but I am not aware that any other exchange has entered into such a partnership. But for us, it was very valuable, because these small companies are growing and they basically have the capacity to become larger. The second platform that we started, although I have to say it's less successful than the Funderbeam, is Progress, which is SME growth market, one of the ideas of the Capital Markets Union, which I have to say, still didn't bring benefits to the exchanges, especially to the smaller exchanges that I have been expecting. And then we have regulated market. On the regulated market happened something which is very common for the transitional countries. And this is that we had a law which forced the companies to list. And at one moment we had 450 companies on the exchange. For comparison, Vienna has 100. So in the course of the years, we had a lot of companies that were actually not ready for the exchange. So I'm not a big fan of listing, mandatory listing to the exchange in any economy. If the companies don't want to come by themselves, it doesn't really make sense to force them in any way.
Yes, it's very interesting. I mean, certainly I noticed that the one I think was always most graphic to me was Belgrade, just down the road from your good selves. I mean, they had 2,000 companies or something, but actually only about 14 of them ever actually did any trading, I seem to recall, about 10 years ago. It's an interesting concept, but it just hasn't really caught on. So you've developed the capital market well. We're going to come back to some of the things you were talking about just a second. Compare, contrast Zagreb Exchange with Ljubljana, Ivana.
Well, you know, we as countries are geographically and in every other sense very close. We share almost the same language and so on. But I would say the countries are still very different. I would say Slovenian economy is much more closed in terms of not having privatized, for instance, their banking sector and many other companies. They are not very open to foreign investors. On the other hand, Croatians are a bit more adventurous, and what I can see is that Croatian investors are very heavily invested into Slovenian companies, but vice versa, it is not the case. So Slovenian investors are not that invested in Croatian. And the second thing, which was a really big surprise for me, was the fact that, so we are in the EU, obviously, and so close, but because of these rules that every country can apply the laws in the European Union with some space to, you know, have some individual differences, actually brought us to the position that many of the laws and the way you run the exchange and run the supervisory board or management board and so on are really different. So I sometimes have a feeling that we are living in two very far countries, not very similar, being both in the EU.
Isn't it interesting? You can manage to get so close, and yet the EU divides you in a way that even as independent nations, you are somewhat proximate. It's quite interesting that, and I think a lot of people miss that because people think that the European Union is incredibly homogeneous. And certainly the further east you get, the more the disparate divisions seem to arise. I don't mean between people, but just between bits and pieces of laws. I mean, the technicalities of running companies. It becomes very difficult, therefore, for example, to easily list across border, etc. I mean, that's something which has not really been cured.
In my opinion, it's very, very difficult to list in other exchange because, look, we would be the first ones. So Zagreb Stock Exchange would be the first one to list on the Ljubljana Stock Exchange because obviously for us, we own both exchanges. Yep. We would like foreign investors to own our shares and so on. But look, we need to write prospectus again because it is not in Slovene. So we need to report in one additional language. So it is not enough to report only in English. You have to report in the local language. That's, you know, only beginning. And all the other things that I wanted to mention, it would take some time. So you really need to be incentivized in order to go to the other exchange. I don't see a point. For instance, we have two stocks from Ljubljana listed in Poland on the Polish Stock Exchange on their MTF, and 99% of the liquidity is still in Slovenia, and it is actually causing additional work to the companies, not giving them a lot of benefits.
Yeah, it's very interesting as to how that develops. And so you were on an interesting path, as you say. You've been developing this whole concept of essentially raising funding from the very lowest level, from crowdfunding all the way up, which is very interesting. I'm here, ladies and gentlemen, speaking with Ivana Gažić. We're inside the Zagreb Stock Exchange this week. I'm coming to you from a rainy Malta, which compares or contrasts with last week, where I came to you from a rainy Turks and Caicos Islands. At least the good news is it's not actually raining on me this week. So Ivana, it's very interesting what you're talking about here. Tell us a little bit. I think we got a question actually came in. asking about what are the key lessons you learned from your Funderbeam experience?
The key lesson is that somehow financing creates the possibility of the growing company. Let me explain. Maybe I say it a little bit confusing. What I wanted to say is that there are a lot of good ideas, but only if you have money and investors who can help these companies, the ideas will develop into serious businesses. And the more I was thinking about Funderbeam in Croatia, I realized why European economy is not more technically advanced, if I can say so. Because US is just offering the sort of financing that was giving first money to to Facebook, to Google, and so on. I cannot imagine that in Europe these companies would succeed starting, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, because we didn't have enough funds devoted to the technology and fast-growing companies with very bold and very brave ideas. This is why I said, look, I will not do a lot. We cannot work with thousands of startups in Croatia, but if we do 50 and we help 50 ideas to become decent businesses, we have done a lot for this community. And I have to tell you that after 3 years of doing that, it's very, very rewarding for us. And I really see a couple of candidates that will in 2 or 3 years be ready for the exchange.
I think that's absolutely marvelous, because it's actually something that's vitally important, because a lot of people have lost the real economy, financial economy linkage. And actually with what you've been achieving with Funderbeam, it's a very, very close linkage between the two. The fact that you might even get some content that ultimately comes to the exchange is even better, but being able to facilitate fundraising is a super, super thing. We're sitting here inside the Zagreb Stock Exchange with Ivana Gažić. Ivana, like many other stock exchange leaders around the world, reads Exchange Invest every day, my newsletter published by myself, Patrick L. Young, with my ACE team. If you'd like to subscribe, send us an email or drop us a message on social media, and we'll be happy to sign you up for a free 1-month trial so you too can read about what the world's exchange leaders are reading week in, week out, every day via the internet, via our newsletter. Now, Ivana, so Funderbeam is here. Then you mentioned the fact that you built this platform, so it was a CMU kind of SME fundraising platform. That doesn't sound as if it really has taken off to the same degree.
No. The idea of Capital Market Union was to create a market that would be exactly very similar to the exchange, but just with much lower reporting requirements, no prospectus, and so on. But somehow it didn't catch up with the companies. I think that other exchanges who are running the SME growth market, like I know that many in Europe are, I don't think that we have done some monumental steps bringing so many SMEs to the exchange. So obviously the magical formula in order to have more listings and have smaller companies being listed is still not invented, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because you're right. I mean, SME growth markets just have not particularly worked in Europe overall. What do you think could be done that might help improve them? Is the problem actually Capital Markets Union itself not being big enough and broad enough across the European Union, or what?
I think the tax incentives in form of investment accounts, like it was done in UK.
Yeah.
Some sort of tax relief for investing into SMEs for individual investors, and also some state fund that would match the funds, for instance, raised through the exchange or through the SME growth market. So I think that would really help, and maybe some special regime for these companies for 3 to 5 years, you know, how they're being treated in tax way or something like that. So I don't think that just by saying you don't need to write 500 pages, now you need to write 100 pages, it will really incentivize the companies to go to the exchange. Yeah.
No, I tend to agree. And given the fact that most of that 100-page or 200 pages or 300 pages is actually all this boilerplate legalese that doesn't really tell you anything about the company. I mean, that's one of the things I think is a fundamental problem here, because it costs so much to get to the market, even for a lot of the SME growth markets, certainly in the West, that it becomes uneconomic for companies to really go forward and try and list on those sorts of venues.
Yeah. Definitely, I really think so. And how to really move it forward? One additional way would be that the advisors for the companies who are taking them to the SME market are also somehow incentivized to do it, because the exchange cannot speak to all the possible issuers in the country. We need to have some sort of sales channel, and our sales channel are our members. And our members or investment advisors need to have that as a priority. It is very difficult to raise such funds in an environment where there is almost zero interest rates on loans and other. We also have EU money, which is coming through many funds and so on. So it's not easy. We are competing with cheaper money, so we need to do very good reasoning why they would come to the exchange.
Yes, it's one of those challenges in order to manage to bring the market together. So let's talk about something which has been really fascinating. You pioneered SEE LINK. Tell us about that and how that came about.
Well, I remember very good one conference in Belgrade, and there was it was at my beginning of my work at the exchange, maybe 2012 or something like that. And there were foreign investors on this panel, and they were talking that they would invest in the region if they could have one broker in one of the countries and be able to place the orders on every exchange in the region. And I thought, it's a very good idea. We should be able to do that. And there were many regions that were talking about connecting in that way. So we got the support from EBRD, and we built up a system in which every exchange has members who have signed up for SEE LINK system. And if you wish to trade from Zagreb broker to, for instance, Belgrade, he will find a counterparty broker in this country and execute the order for you. What actually happened is that brokers started talking to each other, and we did a lot of conferences and traveled together with them to other countries and so on. And what we actually found out is that they have built up very good connections. They continued to trading, but they were not that much using the platform. I understood then that the problem is not that easy. When I was recently trying to buy shares in Macedonia, it was a pain. It's a separate language. You need to change the currency. They're treating you like foreign investors, so you need to go through know your customer procedure that is very lengthy in every country and so on. So actually what still exists, and now I'm talking about the countries of the non-EU, but for the EU, It's pretty similar. It's pretty similar. If you're opening an account in a Slovenian bank, you do all over again like you do in Croatia. So the investors had this dream vision of the US, and the US is a totally different world, because every state in US has the same currency, the same language, the same papers, and you can trade very easily. I think it will take ages until we really have that in Europe. It will be a very slow and very painful process.
Yes, it really is a shame, and it's certainly not helping the developing end of Europe, in Southeastern Europe and Central and Eastern Europe, where there's so much opportunity for growth. But as you say, there's so much paperwork to manage to battle your way through. So, I mean, that is a fascinating pointer altogether. What do you see, therefore, as being the major areas of potential for your exchange group?
I think that we need to continue building our regional championship position in not only the integration, but also always being on the edge with the new trends, attracting new technologies, new products, new members, and so on. So we are trying to be a niche player in terms of exchange world in Europe, but on the regional level, I'm pretty sure that many smaller exchanges are actually looking up to us and saying that there are many things that they can still do in what they are doing, as well as I'm looking at the larger exchanges and trying to do that over here. I can tell you that every 4 years I need to write a program for my work, and that's approved by the regulator. I go to the interview there, and I'm always amazed how much the world changes in 4 years. So I just recently went to see my last plan, and some of the things that happened, we didn't even foresee. You know, we didn't foresee such a huge impact of crypto world to our business, not only from technology point of view and the way exchanges are, you know, actually looking at how they can implement this strategy or technology into our work, but also as competitor, because many of the people who were not at all considering investing are now investing into crypto assets, and they are willing to take these risks. Although in exchange business we are all about protecting minority rights and small investors. So the change is really, the world is changing extremely fast, and if somebody says who knows what will happen in 5 years, he's lying, because we have no idea what will happen in 5 years. That's just too fast pace around us.
Yes, it's very interesting, the speed of change that we're seeing around us driving so much in the exchange industry. And certainly when you look at that, and I mean, you mentioned the fact that you've used NASDAQ technology, you've Xetra nowadays from Deutsche Börse Group and so on, and you think about the number of interfaces that you have to clearing and settlement and so on, it's incredibly complex trying to put together a modern day stock exchange. How is it for you when you're dealing with one of the smallest currencies in Europe? Is that a factor in how your exchange works?
Yes, definitely. But you're asking about our currency, like Croatian kuna.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, kuna. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is complex, but look, it is pegged to euro, and the good news is that we are in exchange mechanism, and the plan is to have euro as our currency 1st of January 2023, which I think will help our business. From technology point of view, it is not that relevant. It will be some work, but nothing significant. But definitely it will help to remove this foreign exchange risk that we had until now.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, it's one thing, I suppose, ought to try and attract other entrants from the rest of the European Union who've got so used to the idea of getting ubiquitous euro pricing across 11, 12, 15 markets.
Yeah. It helps. It really helps. I mean, our economy is very dependent on tourism. We have 20% of our GDP coming from tourists, and obviously they will be much happier when they come to the country and they can buy with their own money. So.
Yes, the facility that's going to offer is going to be something quite significant. So what does it feel like? I mean, you've mentioned in passing, and it's very interesting because you sit on the cusp of Europe inside the European Union, but yet actually you've got a lot of neighbours who are outside the European Union. What is that like in terms of facilitating trade and dealing with the countries around you?
Oh, it's very, very complicated. Look, we were just discussing, we have one company in Croatia, which is called Infobip, and they were just valuated as unicorn, and they are thinking about listing, but they are exclusively thinking about listing in US. And I get all the time questions like, oh, why they didn't list in Croatia, why they don't double list, and so on. So the complexity of the company being listed in US and Croatia is the same like complexity of the company being listed in Croatia and Serbia.
Right.
So, but for the US company, you might be motivated to do it because it's a large company, you know, it might have a lot of investors and so on. But the question is really, is that all worthwhile to do for they call it third country. In the MiFID II, it's always somebody coming from a third country, and it's I don't think that any company. So, for instance, if a Serbian company wanted to raise money in Croatia, what I would do in their place, and they would probably do it, they would start a company in Croatia and then fund from this company in Croatia, not doing something.
Yeah, cross-border. Yeah. Well, certainly it's very interesting because you look at the amount of assets in, let's call it the whole, you know, the whole Yugosphere, I mean, the former Yugoslavia. And it's intriguing how many private equity deals have been done there and how many household names have never touched the stock market. I mean, you know, whether it's Bambi Biscuits or Kniaz Miloš Water or all sorts of other manufacturers of soft drinks and other products. And they've never actually reached the stock market at all, being owned by increasingly obscure vehicles in faraway countries, way beyond, I mean, third countries of third countries. It's quite fascinating how that's happened.
Yeah, I agree with you. But there is a hope, I think, because these funds and the majority of the venture capital funds and so on are still, you know, not the ones that were exiting through the exchange. Their horizon of investing is a little bit off in terms of how they find targets and so on. And the majority of the venture capital funds have just done their biggest investments in the region. So I think the exits through the exchange will come. They are dominant now in Poland or Hungary or something like that. So I think it will come to Croatia as well.
Very interesting. It will be interesting to see when that takes place in Croatia and indeed through the region, because certainly, yes, Poland, I think, is the only place where we've kind of seen venture capital funds, private equity funds ultimately using that as an avenue to exit their investments through the Warsaw Stock Exchange. But of course, I mean, you're in a very different country. So just run us through those numbers for those who are not aware of, you know, the population of Croatia is?
Around 4 million
right.
people.
4 million people, yeah. So, I mean, essentially, it's a very petite, pleasant, small northeastern state of the United States of America in terms of total population. And you're nestling in a very interesting area. You've got 20% of GDP, which is tourism, which I'm not surprised because you've got exquisite coastline, beautiful hinterland, absolutely fantastic. And certainly I thoroughly enjoyed going to one of your conferences many years ago, even when we went there in pretty much the depths of winter, if I seem to remember correctly, to the coast. And it was absolutely magnificent. Yeah,
well, the tourism really did favor to us because we are the car destination, and this year the recovery of Croatia was much faster because the tourism has really, it was really strong no matter the COVID crisis.
That's very interesting. So overall, the Croatian economy has managed to kind of weather the storm of COVID without it being quite as dramatic as it was in other places?
Well, it was not that dramatic like Italy or Spain, but we are in the fourth wave now. And we have problem like many Eastern European countries with the vaccination rate. However, the impact on the economy was not that bad. I just heard the speech of the governor today, our governor, and he said that he expects that we will reach pre-COVID level, perhaps even in this quarter.
Wow.
Which I think is excellent. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's really, really good news altogether. And how did you find running your exchange? I mean, did you have a lockdown period, or how did that work?
It was crazy, I have to say. I will tell you, if somebody told me that I will run the exchange for 6 weeks without stepping into my office, I would say this person is talking nonsense. But I remember very good the last meeting before the lockdown on Friday. We said, look, like I was sitting with my team and I said, well, why don't we do like exercise? And on Monday we stay home to see whether we can really run the exchange from home. And then they said, no, but on Monday we all usually have all crazy, you know, everybody's asking for something and so on. Let's do it on Tuesday. And on that Sunday, there was a recommendation from the state government that everybody who can should stay at home. And we called our people and we said, like, stay home. And everything worked. And then after 1 week, we had a major earthquake in Zagreb on Sunday morning, and our network collapsed because the data center of the telecom provider went to fire. And after that, the whole day we were trying to find alternative ways to trade next day. So it was really, really difficult here, organizationally. Yeah.
Gosh, an earthquake on top of COVID. I think that makes
Yes.
you absolutely unique in the world.
Yes, yes. What we said, you know, what is the next, like the plague or something like that. It was unbelievable.
Well, fortunately, you don't have that Irish saying that these things come in threes, because who knows what the next thing could have been. Could have been.
No, we don't have that. Luckily not.
Luckily not. No, good. You only get to two,
Yeah.
and then that's it. That's a relief altogether. So, I mean, where do you think that the opportunities lie for Zagreb Stock Exchange at the moment? You mentioned, for example, these ETFs. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so we have first two ETFs, and they're actually super product for people who cannot make a decision what to invest in by themselves. So they can say, I can invest in the top 10 most liquid shares on Zagreb Stock Exchange. But if you say so, you need to have a lot of money because you have to buy 10 different stocks. And with ETFs, with, I don't know, 20 euro, you actually invest into a whole bucket of these 10 companies. Just recently, the first ETF on crypto was approved in the US. So the fund can invest basically in anything. If you want to be exposed to gold and you cannot buy a gold coin or more gold, then you can buy for 20 euro or 30 euro stake in the ETF based on gold. So I think it's a very good product for retail. It's liquid because obviously it's on the exchange, and for the exchange it's very good because obviously the ETFs are being traded and they then have to buy stocks in order to have these stocks in the fund, and it's a double turnover for us. So we as exchanges like ETFs. We think it's a good product.
That's very interesting. And I mean, the regional market for ETFs has been relatively sparse to date. So are you hoping to really manage to become a national and then possibly also push the region in the ETF business? Yeah.
I mean, exchanges are not the one who are issuing them. It's investment fund companies, but we are lucky to have Intercapital in Croatia that has pretty large asset management company, and they are thinking about all the time about innovation. And I hope that other investment fund companies are going to lead their example and list ETFs on the exchange.
Very interesting altogether. So when you look at your position, I mean, geographically, you're incredibly close to Italy. You're not that far from Vienna. There are a lot of bourses around you in terms of, you know, a couple of thousand kilometers takes you to a vast number of exchanges across the world. Are there any in particular that really inspire you of the neighbors or of other exchanges around the world?
Well, I have to tell you that I really miss the World Exchange Congresses. The last one was 2 years ago in Beirut.
Yes.
The beautiful Beirut, I have to say, at that time. And I had the opportunity to speak then to the colleagues from all over the world. And exchanges are very individual because they are a result of the long history of the country they are from. But, I learned a lot from Oman Stock Exchange to the NASDAQ to, I don't know, my colleagues from Vienna, and then very dear friends from the region and so on. I cannot say that there is one single exchange that we would like to become or be similar. We are just trying to take the best from the world that we are open to. I love this industry because people are very open, as we are not competing to each other in 99% of the cases. So whenever you ask your colleague how we can implement something, or they ask us how we did something, we always share. So this is why I like the industry, and this is why I actually like your newsletter that you mentioned, because I got the ideas from there as well. So.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear altogether. And actually, I agree with you. That conference in Beirut was absolutely fantastic. And it seems like a lifetime ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Both in terms of COVID and what happened in Beirut.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a tragedy what's gone on in Beirut over the course of the last, they've had precisely the opposite. There's no danger they're going to get back to their economy of 2 years ago in Q4 of this year. I mean, it's lost already something like 30%. It's really, really tragic, and such an amazing city. But then it's one of those things where I think the lesson I drew from being in Beirut was that all of the Uber drivers were actually local people from Beirut, which I've never seen before, because even in Warsaw, the people driving Uber are migrants from Ukraine and Belarus. I mean, it's a sign of the economy being really, really grim when you've actually ending up with the local people wanting to drive the low end of the taxi cab fleet. It's really, really sad altogether, and yet so many things going for it. But yes, I agree with you. I mean, that World Exchange Congress is a great forum, and certainly, we all miss it. We're hoping that it'll be back soon. If you're watching this, good folks at Terrapin, there you go. There's an introduction. Where are we going to next? We want to know. Maybe we can go to Zagreb. Maybe we can go to somewhere on the coast.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I would recommend Dubrovnik, because Dubrovnik is now not overcrowded. It's such a beautiful place when it's not overcrowded. So I think it would be a good place for the World Exchange Congress, definitely.
I think Dubrovnik sounds like a phenomenal opportunity altogether. And of course, you're the president of the Supervisory Board of the Ljubljana Exchange, and it's exciting at the moment because I do believe Slovenia are the presidents of the European Union. So has that been drawing you into many EU events?
When COVID started, it was ours, so Croatian.
My goodness.
Presidency.
Yes.
And there were many. So there were so many plans for the conferences, for visitors and so on, and nothing happened out of that. So actually, Slovenia doesn't have that good epidemiological situation. I don't think they have big forums. Majority of these forums is transferred to either hybrid format or dominantly online. So it is not going to be like it was in other countries when there was no COVID, unfortunately.
That's two tragedies in one, actually, because of course the last time we were supposed to meet was going to be in Zagreb after I was the European bankers, I think I was supposed to be speaking at.
Yes.
And unfortunately that got cancelled, which is such a shame. I do hope things are not too bad in Slovenia, because I know that Mrs. Young is off to the SME and the SME Awards next week. So I hope that things will be okay for her trip there.
She should follow the news, because the restrictions for entering anywhere and so on are pretty tough. But of course, she has a COVID passport, so she can do whatever she wants. But some of the people who don't have it have problems.
No, clearly. Well, I've got to say, actually, to be fair to the European Union, who I would criticise often, their EU passport for COVID has actually been working remarkably well. It's something which is useful for getting across borders around the place. So that's going to be coming up next week, actually, which will be very, very exciting. I won't be there, unfortunately, but Beata will be there for the SME Awards hosted by FESE.
Me neither, but we have a candidate for the, I think, Rising Star or Fast Growing Star.
Fantastic.
Like yeah, so we are very excited to see whether they got the award.
That's magnificent. But even so, to have somebody who's nominated, given how many other markets there are with huge numbers of SMEs listed from London to Euronext and NASDAQ and so on, it's absolutely marvelous to see that that's being acknowledged, Ivana. So, Ivana, I mean, here we are. We're looking at Zagreb, nation of 4 million people roughly in Croatia. You're elegantly nestling really in the heartland of a very, very exciting piece of Europe itself. You've got a lot of growth and a lot of opportunity. I'm intrigued. I mean, where do you think your exchange goes next? Where do you think the capital market revolution goes next?
I think I mentioned it a bit earlier. I think technology will totally change the way we are thinking about trading today. The number of crises or incidents in the past that happened on the capital markets, like, I don't know, Lehman Brothers crisis or something like that, they just caused more and more regulation and more investments into security, into providing a lot of layers between the client and the settlement and so on. And I think that the technology will really try to disrupt this because it became too complex, too expensive, and too slow. Because if you want to change and do something new, it takes you months and months and months. So the first biggest attacker to us as capital markets is obviously the crypto world, because even if these people participate, whatever happens in their investment, if they lose money, if they get stolen or something like that, they will see that they have lost money in the capital markets or investment in general. So they will have even more trust into traditional exchanges. And we will need to find different ways to enable with the technology to make it more secure, but more accessible to the investors. I just spoke to the company that had IPO'd in September on Zagreb Stock Exchange, and they could not believe, they are IT company. They couldn't believe that people need to physically go to the broker in order to buy their shares. And on the other hand, you have Revolut, and you can buy whatever you want. So the question is, why is this so? And it will change for sure. I'm sure it will change.
On that note, with a cri de coeur for seamless operations, with a desire to see that third countries are interlinked in a way that the Zagreb Stock Exchange can better facilitate trading, Ivana Gažić, who's one of the co-founders, creators of the SEE Link that brings together a series of exchanges around the region. She's chairman of the Ljubljana Stock Exchange. She's the chief executive, the president of the managing board of the Zagreb Stock Exchange. Absolutely wonderful to talk to you today, Ivana. It's been a really, really interesting, illuminating picture, how you've brought together Funderbeam and used their platform in order to facilitate crowdfunding and smaller listings. So exciting to know that you've got several possible IPOs that are going to come to market from that in the future. Lovely to see things that are all coming along in the little incubator of future public listed companies. It's been really interesting to talk about the nexus of capital markets union, what's been good and what's indeed been a challenge about capital markets union and the areas in which that needs to grow and come together. Technology remains a fundamental issue for us all. At the same time, while it's wonderful to be here on the wonders of LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube, being able to talk in real time about the wonderful world of markets, it is indeed a joy to be able to get out there and meet people face to face, which I know we will have a presence next week in Slovenia for the SME Awards of FESE, which we're looking forward to. I unfortunately can't be there either. I hope your Rising Star Award comes together really well. I certainly hope that we won't have to wait until the next World Exchanges Congress before we meet again, because we have had a couple of opportunities which have been cancelled in the course of the last couple of years. Fascinating to hear about how you dealt with COVID, dealt with an earthquake. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been inside the Zagreb Stock Exchange. My name is Patrick L. Young. I want to thank my guest, Ivana Gažić. I'd like to thank my production team today, Beata, Veronica, and Marianne. This has been edition number 45 of the Cadre, which is the IPO-VID live stream. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week in life. And of course, as the Executive Director of Valerian Blockchain, I have to say, in blockchain and markets. Thanks for watching.